This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your hosts, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle. Today we have a special guest with us, Mike Dehaan. How are you, Mike?
Doing great. Really appreciate you guys having me on the show. It's cool to, meet you in this sort of environment. We've been involved in a mastermind for a little bit, but I don't think we've ever actually had a good long form conversation. So I'm excited to jump into this.
Well, we are super excited to hear your story and add value to our listeners. So just a quick bio on Mike. So Mike, after spending 5 years as corporate engineer, Mike found his major skill set and passion in building scalable, repeatable systems. After quitting his engineering career in 2018 with no plan, he spent the following 2 years studying real estate investing and business before jumping in the late 2019 to start his investing business. The system he designed has been tweaked, defined, and simplified to allow us to speak to hundreds of motivated sellers every month and build a large rental portfolio. So we're just quickly talking, and I already love what you're doing out there, but why don't you kind of give us more background on yourself? How did this get started? And let's go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I didn't really come from like a real estate background. And when I was in the corporate world as an engineer, I did that mostly because it was like what my parents expected. Right? And then also, starting school, 2009 was when I started in college. That was like what everyone did that was sort of like a high achiever, right? They went into medicine or they went into engineering. And even though I didn't have an interest in it, I wanted to have a secure job. And then when I quit, like I said, I didn't have any plan. I literally just worked in a gym and I drove for Uber and just tried to figure my life out. And I got into real estate mostly because it came up in every wealth generation book and every business book, right? And like most people without money, I was obsessed with passive income. And so I was like, cool, rental income seems to be the easiest way to, find that, right? So I originally started, the first properties I bought, in hindsight, weren't the best first properties just because they ate up all of my capital.
Yep.
So I bought these 2 turnkey single family new builds that were very close to where I lived. And I had a corporate 401k from my 5 years working as a Boeing engineer that I liquidated to buy those. And I didn't know how to analyze deals. I didn't know kind of the whole situation with how rental properties worked. All I knew was that they were going to be new. So that means they should be easy. And my view and analysis was my monthly payment's going to be $1,200. Those should rent for $1,600. I'm going to make $400 a month for each one. Right. But of course, that's not how it works when you look at vacancy, property management, all that sort of stuff. But, I took the leap and that sort of got my, my mind going a little bit as I got a little bit of mailbox money coming in. Right. And then from there, I think that was actually, it put me in a good spot that forced me to learn because I had the desire to keep growing, but I had no capital, right? All of my capital had gone into those first couple of deals. I didn't have a W-2 that was making much money. I was still working in a gym and doing other stuff. And so I got into flipping houses. And because I had a bunch of time and no money, I partnered with another local investor here that had the opposite problem. They had money, but no time. And so we decided that we would flip houses together. We'd split the proceeds. I'd bring the hustle. They'd bring the cash. And we sort of just got started that way. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know. First house I flipped, everything possible went wrong. I didn't realize that you couldn't just turn on frozen pipes and they wouldn't explode and flood the entire house. So we had to deal with that. We had the HVAC system get stolen one night while, we didn't lock up the house correctly. We had a contractor steal money. We didn't comp the house correctly. But because we bought pretty well, we were able to come out okay. And after the first deal, after 4 months of work, I made $4,000, but I got a heck of an education. So that sort of set the momentum and we started going from there. And then flips after that did pretty good. I started to roll some of those proceeds into some rental properties that I would, fix up and refinance out. And then after doing a handful of those, I decided that I wanted to have better deals. So we went off market and I started my wholesaling business, which is what I run today.
Cool. Very cool. Kind of sounds like Shawn's story a little bit, right? Going into engineering and then
making a lot of mistakes.
Yep.
But no, go back to that leaving a good, secure job and what your parents wanted you to do, because I was the same way. But what was that like for you? You know, and I know, I think I think a lot of people struggled, right, to leave that cushy job. I think it's easier, like probably like yourself. Joni and I did it when we were really young, and so like we could lose it all and still start over. We didn't have a lot of obligations, but you know, talk to you a little bit, like, you know, making that jump, making that leap. You know, was it scary? How did you overcome those fears? And
how did your parents take that, right? Because they wanted you to have that job.
For sure. And, you know, it's one of those things that it was like a 10-year process to that. Like, even when I was in school, I didn't want to be an engineer. Like, I hated even the stuff I was learning. And I just told myself the entire time I was going through school that, oh, once I'm making like a paycheck and once I'm doing the actual applicable work, I'll like it better. And then, of course, you start working and you don't like it. And from like the first 6 months I was working, I remember having a conversation with my boss, and I was like, I don't really know if I want to do this. But because I had good income coming in, you know, I had a lot of security, and I would get a lot of like attaboys from people that thought I was doing something pretty cool working at Boeing. I kind of just stuck it out for a while. And then ultimately what kind of, you know, as I was getting into it, I was like more and more bored. I was getting depressed. You know, I had a big bout of depression that I dealt with. And I was driving to work one day, and I called my wife, and I was like, I think I just need to quit my engineering job. And her response was, well, will you be happier? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And she said, cool, well, that's fine. And so I went in and I quit my job that day.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing. So that actually gives me chills when you say that, because I think that's what you just said there, you know, having the support of your spouse or somebody to say, hey, yeah, go do this, right? That can makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, for sure. And the hardest conversation, honestly, was with my parents, especially because I didn't really have a plan. And my mom, especially, she took a lot of value in being able to go like to their spin class and those things and like talk about how her son was an engineer at Boeing and all this stuff. Yeah. And all of a sudden, he's now like a vagrant that is just like, you know, working in a gym and like trying to do nothing. I don't know. And so that was challenging.
Like it's a hobby. It's just a hobby.
Totally. And, you know, when making the decision, like it was scary for sure, because we gave up 75% of our income. You know, even though my wife had a job, I made the most money. But building up to that, because I had been learning kind of about like financial independence and all that stuff, we had been living below our means. I'd been saving a lot of money. I'd been putting a lot in our 401k. So we had a cushion. And I think we had it calculated out that if we lived like our exact current lifestyle, we could go for like a year and a half just off of savings. If my wife didn't have a job before we would run out. But even better, what we did is, you know, we just made a mutual agreement that we were going to dial back our expenses, live off of just her salary. And the crazy thing is how easy we actually found that to just live a more simplified lifestyle. Because like, I don't know, when you're not miserable every day, you don't kind of like seek the expensive escapes quite as much. Yeah. Right. So it was easier for us to find, you know, entertainment and like, you know, going for a picnic instead of going to like a nice dinner. Right. Or like just doing stuff that was simpler because your general tone was just happier in life in general.
Totally. We say that every once in a while. Like, remember those times we just went, like, took the afternoon off and you go to watch a movie or just hang out, right? Yeah. You know, so question for you, did your parents finally come around to it all? Like, did they take it serious that this is your job, your business?
Yeah. The funny thing is they didn't really get it. Right. Because so my parents, they bought the house that I grew up in like the 80s, and they still live there. Okay. And so they've never really done the real estate thing themselves. And then now I'm like getting these loans, like flip these properties, like I'm making money and all this sort of stuff. But they didn't really know the direction, especially when I started doing that. It was 2019. The people that got into real estate at that point were like, you know, ex-college baseball players and like people that couldn't do anything else, right? Like the ex-athlete, that was like your thing, was like, oh, you didn't make it through school really, so now you're going to go and you're going to sell cars, you're going to sell real estate, you're going to, you know, do a MLM thing, right? Like that's what people do. Yeah. And so they didn't really know the direction of it. And honestly, it was only after we started to have some major traction, like, and I honestly, I had developed my podcast and people started to like listen to that. And all of a sudden I'm having like random people that are talking about me out there that my parents are like, oh, he like actually like put something together, I think. Right. And, you know, the money side of it was one thing, but I think that they were worried about like the sustainability of it and like the opportunity that was there. But it took years, but they finally came around.
Yeah. That's amazing. Love it.
Let's get into some of your real estate. You know, what do you, in your opinion, you know, you've grown it, you know, considerably, and you're taking something nationwide now, but what do you think, like, key principles or strategies that you believe make it important for real estate investing? Like, what characteristics, maybe individually for you, like, to be a successful real estate investor, do you think it takes?
Yeah. So especially right now, I mean, I've only ever really done volume in, you know, the post-COVID era. Yeah. Before that, I did a handful of deals. You know, it was all stuff they were buying off the market, and you could get by with like just the traditional real estate education, the box, you know, all that sort of stuff. But now doing it at scale in this competitive market, the number one thing that a lot of people don't like seem to want to do is you kind of have to like not have a box. You kind of need to be an opportunist, right? And learn to recognize opportunities and understand how real estate works with like all the different options. And it's a hard thing to do because I think that people that when they start this business, they're like, I want to own like nice properties in like nicer parts of town. You know, these are the kind of houses I want to flip. These are the kind of neighborhoods I want to work in. When realistically, to make money, you kind of need to throw that out the window and instead focus on how can I maximize every single conversation that I'm having. Right. So over the course of the past few years, especially in 2021, when, you know, everyone and their, you know, sister was in real estate, we were able to do extremely well because we were heavily focused on trying to figure out how to like find opportunities as opposed to have opportunities find us. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we did that through marketing, direct to seller, which is one part of it, but we were also doing, you know, we were doing wholesaling, we were doing cash offers, we were doing subject twos, we were doing seller finance deals, you know, we were learning how to do novations, we were doing like land subdivisions, we were doing everything that we could. And I didn't know how to do any of those things until the opportunities would come through and I'd be like, hey, how do we subdivide a lot? I have no idea, but like, this seems like we could do it here. So let's figure it out. And then sure enough, we would go through the motions and we would make money. And now that's built like sort of a war chest of knowledge that allows us to create opportunity with every lead that comes through instead of like just having sort of like a, you know, one tool in our toolbox.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you see, I mean, it's really, it's down to the marketing instead of, it's not the deal. I guess it's the deal, but I mean, like, you're not chasing the deal. You're doing the marketing, and you're really a marketing business, I guess, if that makes any sense of what I'm trying to say. Honestly, you're completely right. Once you start to get into the direct to seller realm,
it's not really a real estate business anymore. It's a marketing and sales business, and the real estate is the collateral that we get paid with.
Correct. Yeah, I mean. You said that a lot better than I just said that.
Loved it.
But tell us more about. I know, you know, we've scaled over the years. We've cut back recently, but you know, done a lot of deals. Something that we struggled with, I think, back in the day, and I'm curious how you're overcoming it. And I think I know how you're doing it now with like partnerships. But how do you duplicate that? What you just mentioned, and you know. It's not like a clear cookie cutter, like we're only buying these houses, these is how much you offer, this is what
you have a niche and you focus directly on it.
But he's also doing multiple strategies or taking the lead that comes in and making something out of it or doing something. What we always found was that's very hard to teach like acquisition managers or people like to get that knowledge to understand it well enough to be successful. Does that make sense? What I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So how have you overcome that, especially when you start to scale and you're not the one taking those leads and answering them? How do you build a team that can analyze and see the different variables that you can do with a lead?
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, and that is very challenging, right? And it's something that we actively are trying to solve all the time. You know, like honestly, what that looks like for us right now is the best. We focus on the conversations with the seller as opposed to, you know, we have the acquisition managers focus on the sellers and the conversations that they're having as opposed to each individual deal. And then our underwriters, which is me or my business partner most of the time, are the ones that try to piece together the opportunity. So what we do, we have our acquisition team. They have like a 5-point script that they go through when they talk to people. We have, the 5 questions that we try to verify. If they hit 2 out of 5, then we consider it a valid lead. And then we will look at the opportunity there and try to figure out the best way to structure it. And those questions are like, do they actually want to sell the property? Why are they calling us versus a realtor? Right? It's trying to fish out their motivation without being like, oh, so are you desperate? Which is always a terrible question because they're going to, push back on that. Yeah. When are they wanting to sell? What is the condition of the property? And then lastly, what is their price expectation? And if they hit 2 out of 5 of those, then we know that it's time to take a look. And from there, we will try to piece together the best deal structure, just depending on the information that they're able to gather in their initial phone calls. And after a while, the acquisition guys, just through reps, they'll start to be able to recognize patterns themselves. But it is hard, right? Because especially so many acquisition guys that come into this, the good ones, a lot of them don't have real estate experience. Our best acquisition people have had experiences as a bartender, or sort of hard insurance sales, things that are very person facing. And, if you don't have general real estate knowledge, teaching sort of niche real estate knowledge is really, really hard.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about maybe some of the sales training that you offer these acquisition specialists. And then with that also, how often do you meet with them? And I know, partnerships in other locations as well. How do you scale that?
Yeah. So our business is fully virtual. So all of my sales guys are virtual. None of them are closing in the markets that they actually live in. We have this partnership model, which has been our version of scaling this. And so how it works is we have these partners in different markets that they basically pay to run the system. We run the system, and then we get a portion of all the deals. They get the bulk of the upside basically as the reward for paying for the system. And the main reason that we went to that partnership model versus just doing everything virtual ourselves was because we would find the challenges of being able to nurture local investors, knowing the neighborhoods, all that sort of stuff was scale prohibitive. So we started, relying on the local experts themselves, and then we have them buy into the system so they have stake in the game.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we've built that out. And then in terms of the sales training that we offer, we have a kickoff meeting every morning where we'll do sales training twice a week. We'll do call reviews and things like that. But in terms of the actual hard training, honestly, I just use all the content that other people have put out there. We have a bunch of YouTube videos about how to do real estate training, how to explain subject twos, how to do all that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of content creators that want people to learn that, right? I don't need to recreate the wheel. I'm going to say the same thing. I mean, that's where I learned, right? So I just put them through the same course. And then a lot of it that we coach on is just the application of it.
Yeah.
And how to actually recognize those opportunities that they learned about from the guy in the YouTube video.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So if Mike had a crystal ball, we say, where the market is headed, where do you think, Mike, the market is headed?
I mean, this is such a challenging question. I literally just got back from a meetup in Austin last week. And, with the guy who put it on he's very in tune with real estate economics and the economy in general. And he's the really challenging thing that we're seeing in so many markets is we are seeing an increase in time on market, but also still a low historical supply, right? So that basically means that there's no sellers, but there's also no buyers.
Yeah.
Right. And with the interest rate situation, the affordability that just is going on everywhere, it's really hard to know what's going to happen.
Yep.
I really do think that we're just going to have an extended period of time of stagnant real estate prices. Where stuff isn't going to go up, stuff isn't going to necessarily go down, because people also don't want to walk away from the equity.
Right.
Right. But I think right now, as an investor, if you want to create the most opportunity, it is going to be you're going to need to be focusing on how can you create that opportunity without having to rely on conventional financing.
Yeah.
Right. So seller financing, whether you you start a fund, right? You buying subject to with old debt. that's cheaper, things like that. If you want to keep building a portfolio right now, that's really a must.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good idea. So what's some common mistakes that you have seen investors make over the years, and how do you try to avoid them or recommend avoiding them?
Yeah. The number one mistake that people make is they try a marketing channel, or they try like some form of acquisition, and they do it for like a month and they move on to the next one. Like literally the number one thing that leads to success in this business is consistency.
Right.
Whether that's consistency in marketing, consistency in networking, consistency in making offers. And, you know, even like experienced investors will do the same thing. Like we have people that we've talked to that have been around for 5-6 years and they only own, 10 properties. And I'm like, the reason that you haven't gotten that far is because in 5 or 6 years, you've tried 50 or 60 things. Like what if you had just done one from day one? You would probably be doing a lot better at this point.
100%.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
What as far as like risk, especially with the uncertainty where we're at, and how do you manage risk? What do you yourself in your own business, making sure, I know when you run a marketing engine like you're doing, it's a lot of money you're spending on marketing, a lot of money going out. What are you doing to manage that risk and making sure, there's more money at the end of the month than going out? Yeah.
Yeah. The cash flow problem is the hardest part of this business, man.
Yeah.
Like in any sort of real estate, because it is so capital intensive. I mean, we usually keep like several months reserve just in cash, not that our marketing won't perform, but it's just that, closings get delayed, right? Or like, you have a bunch of capital outlay that goes out and for whatever reason, house doesn't go pending fast enough. You have a buyer back out the last second and you try to project stuff coming back and it just takes longer than you expect.
Yeah.
And so that's honestly the biggest thing we do is we just have our 3-month sort of buffer that we just hold in cash at all times. And so that's not completely dead. We just keep it in like a high yield account. So it makes like 5%, right? And we just accept that is going to be kind of like sitting capital, but at least gives us some reserve if stuff gets weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that because I don't know a lot of investors that do that. So, it's so smart to do that.
Yeah. We've been building since 2015, building homes, and the last 3 years have been like brutal in that, like, cause you might sell them all, but like we would have like waiting on poles, electrical poles to be installed, or they ran out of transformers there for a little while. And it's like, it was just a nightmare too.
Or the buyers are taking forever to get their financing.
It's a lot of stuff that was out of your control, and but again, you have all that cash outlay, and then just to control the cash flow is always the hardest part about the building.
Yeah. And that's a big reason that we wholesale as well too, as one of our primary exit strategies, is because the velocity of capital is so much higher.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Even though we'll make 50% of what the flipper could make, it takes us 3 weeks and we don't have to outlay any capital.
Totally.
Versus if you're flipping the house, we're having to, raise money or put down payment on a hard money loan and come out construction costs and all those things.
Yeah. We've got a lot of, listeners that are thinking about being an investor, or maybe they're just started out. What advice would you give them coming into this?
Yeah. Join a community of people that are running a business exactly like how you want to run it. If you don't know what that looks like, then join a bunch of communities and find the one that you vibe with the best. Yeah. That was the turning point for me when I went from being like the casual flipper where I had a partner and we were doing a couple to, the following years when we started going off market, I started making real money. All of a sudden I was spending all of my time in an online community that was with people that were doing exactly what I wanted to do. And that not only helps with accountability, but also too, you'll meet people and you'll be like, this person's no different than me, but they just made my old annual salary in like a month. Right. And you're like, what is the difference here? It's like, oh, they've just, put the pieces in place for longer. And it's very, very motivating to be around that.
Oh, that's great. So tell us about what you have coming up next. Like what are you looking to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So we have our podcast that we started, which has been a really fun endeavor. We've been running that for about 2 years. That's one of my goals is to try and figure out how to grow that so we can be an authority in the wholesaling space, which is a very small community. So we're actually grown pretty well. And actually what we're trying to do right now is figure out how to franchise or license our wholesaling model, because we've proven it works. And we have these partners right now in 20 different markets across the country.
Wow.
And so we're trying to honestly turn it into a SaaS-based franchise product where someone can come in and have like their wholesale business in a box that they just like plug in, and they can operate exactly how we've operated and been able to do, 350 transactions in the last 3 years. And they can just plug and play with exactly what we do. So that's my goal over the next, 2 years. And then 5 years, honestly, I'm hoping to pursue an exit with that. But we got to get the pieces rolling kind of first.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an awesome endeavor. And I'd love to see somebody pull that off and accomplish that. So that's
amazing.
That's great.
So Mike, if you could go back in your early 20s, what advice would you give yourself?
It's such a hard question. It's funny. I think about this a lot because like my initial gut reaction is to say like, don't pursue the engineering route. But I also think that was
part of
that set me up for success, primarily because it cemented what I don't want my life to look like, right? It gave me the ultimate motivation of what I'm running away from. And I think that if I went back to my early 20s, what I would say is like, don't worry about what people think as much, right? And be willing to sort of take some more risks, because I was, even though I wasn't happy in what I was doing, and I do think the engineering career sort of set me up to do well, I could have definitely gone a lot faster if I had, been not as concerned about, people's views on me being an engineer, and I had just sort of put myself out there a little bit more earlier.
Right. Huh. That makes sense. I love it.
Yeah. Most of our guests, like that's similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. They, it's like they wouldn't change much because it's like
part of the plan.
That's what made them where they are today, or got them to where they are today. So, But how can people connect with you, learn more about your kind of partnership program, your podcast? How can they reach you?
Yeah, so the best way to reach me personally is on Instagram. It's at Mike_invests. I'm very active on there and always at the chat with people. If you don't have Instagram, you can also email me at mike@collectingkeys.com. And then if you want to hear more about our business and what we do, the Collecting Keys podcast is our show, and we have more information about our different programs at collectingkeyspodcast.com.
Awesome. Well, it's been amazing to have you on this show today, Mike. We loved hearing your story, and think our listeners are going to get so much value out of this. So thank you again for joining us here today.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate it. So if you like this, please share it. Please rate it. Your ratings matter. And so we'll see you all next week.
See ya, everyone.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkle. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there, talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.